For thousands of years, the story of Sodom and Gomorrah was considered by many to be nothing more than a moral legend. According to the book of Genesis, these cities were destroyed in a single moment by fire and sulfur falling from the heavens. Most historians believed that such an event was impossible, or at least exaggerated by ancient writers to teach a religious lesson. However, a team of archaeologists working in the Jordan Valley recently uncovered something that has forced the scientific world to stop and listen. They found the ruins of a massive Bronze Age city known today as Tall el-Hammam. This city was not just a small village. It was a powerful and wealthy center that dominated the region for centuries. As the archaeologists dug deeper into the ground, they encountered a strange layer of dark ash that covered the entire site. This layer was nearly 5 feet thick in some places, indicating a destruction of massive proportions that happened all at once. What was even more unusual was that the destruction did not look like a typical fire caused by an invading army. Instead of broken spears and arrowheads, they found evidence of extreme heat that defied easy explanation. The researchers discovered that the mud brick walls of the city had literally vanished, leaving only the stone foundations behind. In a normal fire, mud bricks turn hard like pottery, but here they had been pulverized into fine dust and blown away. This suggests that the city was hit by a force so powerful that it didn't just burn the buildings, it disintegrated them. The scientific team began to realize that they were looking at a high heat event that occurred around 1650 BC. This date aligns surprisingly well with the period traditionally associated with the biblical patriarchs. Inside this thick layer of ash, the team found fragments of pottery that had undergone a terrifying transformation. The surface of these clay pots had turned into green glass, a process that requires temperatures far higher than any ancient kiln could produce. For clay to melt and turn into glass, it must be exposed to heat exceeding 2,000 degrees Celsius for several seconds. This is the kind of heat you would expect to find at a volcanic eruption or a modern nuclear blast site. The discovery of melted pottery was the first major clue that something from the sky had hit the city. The archaeologists also found melted mud bricks that had turned into a bubbly, glassy material, indicating they were hit by a sudden blast of intense energy. This material is very similar to what scientists found at the Trinity nuclear test site in New Mexico. Since there were no nuclear weapons in the Bronze Age, the only other explanation is a cosmic event. The heat was so intense that it even melted the gold and silver jewelry worn by the inhabitants of the city. Everything that was once a sign of wealth was turned into liquid and then cooled into distorted lumps. As the team expanded their search, they noticed that the destruction was not limited to just the city of Tall el-Hammam. Other nearby sites showed the exact same layer of ash and the same signs of extreme thermal damage at the same time in history. This proved that the event was not a localized accident or a simple fire in one building, but a regional catastrophe. An entire civilization in the fertile valley was wiped out in an instant, leaving the land barren for centuries. This matches the biblical description of a plain that was once like the Garden of Eden, but became a wasteland. The scientists began to collect samples of the soil and the melted artifacts to send them to specialized laboratories for further testing. They needed to know if this heat came from the earth or from space, as the Bible suggests. Preliminary results showed that the soil contained rare minerals that are typically associated with meteorites and cosmic impacts. The excitement among the researchers was mixed with a sense of dread as they realized the scale of the tragedy. They were literally standing on a graveyard of a city that had been erased from history by a wall of fire. This first block of evidence sets the stage for a scientific investigation that bridges the gap between ancient texts and modern physics. We are no longer talking about a story from a Sunday school book, but a forensic crime scene from the ancient world. The radar and the shovels have revealed the what, but now we must look for the how and the why. In the next section, we will look at the specific minerals found in the ash and what they tell us about the source of the fire. The truth about what happened to Sodom is more terrifying than we ever imagined. The mystery of the melted pottery led the scientists to look closer at the soil chemistry of Tall el-Hammam. They used powerful electron microscopes to examine the dust from the ash layer and found something extraordinary. They discovered tiny grains of sand that had been physically deformed by an incredible amount of pressure. In science, these are known as shocked quartz, and they are usually only found at nuclear test sites or where a large meteorite has hit the Earth. This was the definitive proof that the city was not destroyed by a normal fire or a local volcano, but by a cosmic event. In addition to the shocked quartz, the laboratory analysis revealed the presence of diamondoids. These are microscopic diamonds that are smaller than a virus, and they form instantly when carbon is hit by a massive pressure wave. Such diamonds are a classic signature of a cosmic airburst, which happens when a comet or meteor explodes in the atmosphere before hitting the ground. The presence of these minerals under the ruins of the city suggests a level of violence that is hard for the human mind to grasp. It was as if the very air around Sodom turned into a hammer of pure energy. Another terrifying discovery in the ash layer was a high concentration of salt that covered the entire region after the event. The radar and soil samples showed that the salt levels were so high that agriculture became impossible for over 600 years. This scientific fact aligns perfectly with the biblical story of Lot's wife and the transformation of the fertile valley into a salt wasteland. The force of the explosion likely vaporized part of the Dead Sea, pushing a massive wave of saltwater and minerals over the cities. This explains why the Garden of Eden described in the Bible suddenly became a dead desert. The researchers also identified tiny spheres of melted iron and silica, known as spherules, scattered throughout the destruction layer. These spherules are created when metal and rock are vaporized into a gas and then cool down rapidly as they fall back to Earth. Finding these thousands of years later is like finding the bullets from a cosmic machine gun that targeted the city. Every sample tested by the scientists pointed to a heat source that moved at thousands of miles per hour. This was not a slow disaster. It was an atmospheric explosion that happened in the blink of an eye. The direction of the debris also provided a chilling map of how the destruction moved across the valley. Most of the walls and objects were blown toward the northeast, away from the direction of the Dead Sea and the sky above it. This shows that the blast wave had a specific origin point in the atmosphere, creating a line of fire that leveled everything in its path. The structures didn't just fall, they were pushed over by a wall of air that was hotter than any furnace. This matches the description of fire and sulfur falling from the heavens and consuming the entire plain. Some of the human remains found in the area also told a story of sudden and absolute terror. The bones were not just burned, they were shattered into tiny fragments and mixed with the melted mud bricks and ash. Forensic experts concluded that the bodies were hit by a pressure wave so intense that it caused immediate total destruction. There was no time to run, no time to hide, and no time to realize what was happening. The residents of the city were erased in the same second that their homes were turned into dust and glass. To confirm their theory, the scientific team compared their findings with the 1908 Tunguska event in Siberia. In that event, a meteor exploded in the air and flattened 80 million trees, but left no crater on the ground. The evidence at el-Hammam suggests a similar but much more powerful airburst happened over the Jordan Valley. The heat was so intense that it didn't just flatten trees, it melted the very foundations of a civilization. This comparison provides a modern scientific framework for understanding how a miracle of destruction could actually be a rare but real cosmic phenomenon. The more the scientists studied these minerals, the more they realized that the ancient writers were describing a real event with incredible accuracy. They used the language of their time to describe a rain of fire, but they were recording a scientific reality. The cosmic airburst theory explains every anomaly found at the site, from the melted gold to the poisoned, salty soil. We are looking at a moment where space and Earth collided, creating a catastrophe that stayed in human memory for millennia. In the next block, we will explore the specific geography of the 5 cities of the plain. The book of Genesis describes a very specific location for the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, placing them in the circle of the Jordan. This area was said to be extremely fertile and well-watered, looking more like the land of Egypt than a desert. For a long time, historians looked for these cities at the southern end of the Dead Sea, but they found very little evidence there. However, the site of Tall el-Hammam is located in the northern plain, exactly where the biblical geography suggests the 5 cities once stood. This geographical match is the first major bridge between the ancient text and the modern archaeological discovery. The radar scans and satellite images of the Jordan Valley reveal that Tall el-Hammam was the largest city in the region during the Bronze Age. Around it, there were several smaller cities and villages that formed a powerful political and economic circle. This aligns perfectly with the biblical mention of Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and Bela. These cities shared the same resources, and according to the evidence, they also shared the same terrible fate. The ash layer we discussed earlier covers this entire group of cities, proving that the catastrophe was regional and wiped out the entire circle. One of the most interesting details in the Bible is the mention of tar pits, or bitumen pits, in the valley of Siddim. Geologists have confirmed that the area around the Dead Sea is naturally rich in bitumen, oil, and natural gas that can seep through the ground. The secret radar scans have detected large underground pockets of these flammable materials right beneath the ruins of the cities. If a cosmic airburst hit the ground, it would have ignited these underground fuel sources, creating a secondary explosion from below. This explains why the Bible describes fire not just falling from the sky, but consuming the entire ground. The Bible also notes that when Abraham looked toward the valley the next morning, he saw smoke rising from the land like smoke from a furnace. Scientists explain that a cosmic impact would create a massive vacuum, followed by a pillar of fire and smoke that could be seen for hundreds of miles. The description of a furnace is very specific because it suggests a thick, dark smoke caused by burning minerals and organic material. Archaeology shows that the city was filled with stored grain, textiles, and wooden structures that would have fueled such a fire for days. Abraham was not looking at a myth, he was witnessing the aftermath of a thermal disaster. Another geographical clue is the sudden abandonment of the most fertile land in the entire region for over 6 centuries. Usually, after a city is destroyed by war, people return within a few years to rebuild because of the water sources. However, the soil analysis shows that the land of Tall el-Hammam remained a forbidden valley where nothing could grow. The salt pushed onto the land by the blast made the soil toxic to every type of ancient crop. This long period of silence in the archaeological record confirms the biblical curse that left the valley barren and uninhabited for generations. The radar has also mapped the ancient trade routes that connected these cities to Egypt and Mesopotamia. These roads were the lifeblood of the region, making the cities of the plain incredibly wealthy and influential. The Bible describes these cities as places of great luxury, which often leads to the pride and behavior mentioned in the text. When the airburst happened, it didn't just kill people, it destroyed the most important trade hub in the Jordan Valley. The economic impact was so great that it changed the history of the Middle East, shifting power to other regions far away. Archaeologists found that the massive fortifications of Tall el-Hammam, which were over 30 feet thick, were blown off their foundations. The stones were scattered in a way that shows the force came from the southwest, directly from the center of the valley. This level of detail allows researchers to pinpoint the exact ground zero of the explosion in the atmosphere. It matches the biblical narrative where the destruction begins in the plain and moves toward the cities. The geography of the ruins is like a silent witness that points its finger toward the heavens, confirming the source of the fire. Today, the valley is a place of dry heat and salt, but the radar allows us to see the garden that existed before the fire. We can see the ancient irrigation canals and the footprints of a civilization that thought it was invincible. The contrast between the beauty of the past and the desolation of the present is exactly what the Bible warns about. The geography tells us that Sodom was a real place with real people and a real environment. In the next block, we will look at the most famous part of the story, the transformation into salt and the science of the salt pillar. One of the most famous and haunting parts of the Sodom story is the fate of Lot's wife, who was reportedly turned into a pillar of salt. For a long time, this was seen as a purely symbolic or supernatural event that science could never explain. However, the discovery of the cosmic airburst at Tall el-Hammam has provided a shocking new perspective on this ancient account. When the meteor exploded over the Jordan Valley, it created a massive thermal wave that moved faster than the speed of sound. This wave didn't just carry heat, it carried a concentrated mixture of vaporized salt, sulfur, and boiling minerals from the nearby Dead Sea. The science of thermal vaporization explains that anyone standing in the path of this wave would be instantly covered in a thick layer of superheated minerals. If a person was lagging behind the group, as the Bible describes Lot's wife doing, they would have been hit by the full force of the salt-rich blast. Within seconds, the intense heat would evaporate all the moisture from the human body, leaving behind a calcified, salt-crusted remains. To someone looking back from a distance, the person would no longer look human, but like a white crystalline structure fixed to the ground. This is a terrifyingly accurate description of what modern physics says would happen in a high-salt airburst. The radar and soil scans of the region confirm that the concentration of salt in the air during the event was high enough to encapsulate objects instantly. Researchers found fragments of wood and textiles that had been turned into mineralized fossils by the sudden influx of salt and heat. This process is very similar to what happened in Pompeii, where people were frozen in ash, but in Sodom, the material was salt and sulfur. The biblical description of a pillar of salt is not a poetic exaggeration, but a forensic observation of a rare chemical phenomenon. It shows that the person who recorded the story was describing a physical reality they had witnessed. Another interesting factor is the presence of brine rain that followed the initial explosion. When the Dead Sea water was vaporized into the atmosphere, it didn't just disappear. It fell back to Earth as a thick, salty sludge. This material would have coated everything in the valley, creating a white, frozen landscape in the middle of a burning desert. The radar shows that this salt layer was so thick that it preserved the outlines of the city walls and even some organic remains for a short time. Lot's wife would have been caught in this white rain, becoming a permanent part of the landscape she was trying to leave behind. Geologists have also found natural salt formations in the area that take on human-like shapes due to erosion over thousands of years. While these are natural, they serve as a constant reminder of the disaster that poisoned the land. The Bible uses the story of the salt pillar as a warning about the danger of looking back at a life of corruption. But archaeology shows us that the warning was also grounded in a physical danger that was very real at the moment of the blast. The air itself became a weapon of mineralization, turning life into stone and salt in an instant. The sulfur mentioned in the Bible also plays a key role in this scientific explanation. The soil at el-Hammam contains small yellow balls of nearly pure sulfur, which are unique to this destruction layer. These sulfur balls can be ignited and burn with a blue flame that is extremely difficult to extinguish. When the meteor exploded, it likely showered the city with millions of these burning fragments, creating a rain of fire that lasted for hours. Any person caught in this rain would be covered in a mixture of burning sulfur and salt, creating the exact conditions described in the ancient texts. The terror of this moment is captured in the physical evidence of the ruins. We see pottery that was melted on one side but not the other, showing exactly where the heat wave hit. This proves the speed and direction of the event, which was so fast that the victims had no time to react. The pillar of salt is a symbol of a judgment that was as swift as it was absolute. By using radar to see through the layers of time, we are beginning to understand the trauma that was etched into the memory of the survivors. They didn't just tell a story, they were trying to process a cosmic catastrophe that changed their world. As we conclude this block, the evidence from el-Hammam shows that the most impossible parts of the Bible are often the ones with the strongest scientific basis. The salt, the fire, and the sudden destruction are all supported by the minerals found in the ash. We are no longer looking at a myth, but at a documented event in the history of our planet. In the final block, we will look at the deeper meaning of this discovery and why it matters for us today. The secret of Sodom is finally out, and the message it carries is louder than ever. The scientific confirmation of the destruction at el-Hammam has changed how we look at the Bible and ancient history forever. We now know that the story of Sodom is not just a moral tale, but a witness report of a rare and terrifying cosmic event. For centuries, people thought the idea of a city being erased by fire from the sky was impossible, but physics has shown us that the universe is far more dangerous than we realized. The ash layer and the melted glass under the desert sand are the physical fingerprints of a tragedy that was preserved in human memory for over 3,000 years. This discovery proves that ancient traditions often carry the truth about events that science is only now beginning to understand. The legacy of Sodom serves as a powerful reminder of how fragile human civilizations truly are when faced with the forces of nature and space. The cities of the plain were the most advanced and wealthy of their time, yet they were destroyed in a matter of seconds by an event they could not see coming. This archaeological site warns us that our modern cities are not immune to the same cosmic risks that leveled Tall el-Hammam in the Bronze Age. By studying the ruins, scientists are learning more about planetary defense and the history of meteor impacts on our own planet. The story of the past is helping us prepare for the future, showing that history and science are always connected. One of the most important lessons from this discovery is the accuracy of the geographical and environmental details found in the book of Genesis. The mention of the salt, the smoke like a furnace, and the specific location of the cities shows that the authors were recording real observations. This gives new credibility to other biblical accounts that have been dismissed as myths by modern critics. If the story of Sodom's destruction is based on a verifiable scientific event, then we must ask what other secrets are waiting to be uncovered in the ancient texts. Archaeology is not just about finding stones, it is about finding the truth that was hidden behind the language of the miraculous. The forbidden nature of the Jordan Valley after the blast also highlights the long-term impact of such a disaster on human culture. For 600 years, people avoided the region, passing down the story of the city of sin to ensure that no one would return to the poisoned land. This cultural memory acted as a survival mechanism, protecting future generations from the toxic salt levels that the radar has now confirmed. The Bible preserved this warning in a way that people could understand and remember throughout the centuries. We are now seeing that religion and history often work together to preserve the most important lessons of our survival as a species. As we look at the digital models of the melted pottery and the shattered bones, we are reminded of the human cost of this ancient catastrophe. These were not just names in a book. They were families, merchants, and builders who saw their entire world disappear in a flash of light. The secret radar scans allow us to honor their history by finally understanding the reality of what they experienced. Science has not removed the divine element of the story, but it has provided a window into the physical mechanism used to change history. The fire that fell from the sky left a mark on the earth that can still be measured today. Today, visitors to the region of Tall el-Hammam can still see the white, barren landscape that Abraham and Lot once looked upon. The salt and the sulfur are still there, serving as silent witnesses to the power of the heavens. Our investigation shows that the Bible is a remarkably resilient record of our past, surviving through wars, empires, and the passage of time. The stones of Sodom have finally spoken, and their message is one of both destruction and revelation. We are living in a time where technology is finally catching up with the memories of our ancestors, allowing us to see the world as they did. This investigation into the melted city is a perfect example of why biblical archaeology is so vital for our understanding of the world. At Stone Echoes, we believe that every discovery in the dirt is a step closer to understanding the great mysteries of our existence. The evidence from the Jordan Valley shows that we should never be too quick to dismiss the stories of the past as mere fiction. There is always a reason why a story survives for thousands of years, and usually that reason is buried just a few feet beneath the surface. The fire of Sodom has cooled, but the light it sheds on our history is brighter than ever. Thank you for exploring this terrifying discovery with us and for seeking the truth behind the legends of the ancient world. If you found this scientific look at Sodom and Gomorrah eye-opening, please share this video with others who love history and archaeology. Your engagement helps us continue our mission to uncover the secret history of the Bible using the latest technology and evidence. Don't forget to subscribe to Stone Echoes and hit the notification bell so you can join us for our next archaeological investigation. The past is still speaking, and we are here to make sure its voice is heard.